Welcome again to Bull Like a Leopard on this festive Sunday afternoon. As you can see, I'm wearing my Sunday best, but we're not going to talk about that right now because there's a lot to do today. I might end up watching the game, and I might not catch up most of it because I'm doing wall-to-wall from now until probably 4 o'clock content, either with people that are live, including the Barcelona interview, and potentially a different one that we'll see where it goes. I just wanted to discuss a conversation I had this morning, actually only about an hour ago, with another person. And it was, to me, really indicative of why I have the opinions that I do and why I can't seem to, accept the fact that I belong in any category of people. So let me lay it out clear. I oppose any ideology that seeks to coerce people to submit their own economic and social freedom for the good of a collective. Okay, now if people want to volunteer and join a collective that there are rules there and people have to obey them, I think that there you get an area where you've already seen them choose where they want to go with their personal freedoms and their social responsibilities. That does not mean that I don't think that there are social responsibilities of being in a country. Obviously, a free nation, even as free as it may be, sometimes may need to draft people for war or levy taxes or have people serve on a jury, all sorts of things. There's numerous areas where the state demands of people to give more than their neighbors or more than previous generations, and those issues arise. I'm a realist. I'm not a libertarian absolutist. I am a free speech absolutist up to a point, meaning that if there is a type of speech that I think should be banned by the Constitution or be illegal, I still don't know what it is, except for incitement to violence or threats. I think that those fall into a different category. Other than that, I am pretty much a freedom of speech absolutist. So what happened with this argument? We were arguing with a gentleman. Unfortunately, somebody who was a conservative started the argument, but the liberal person who, he's a person with low income, he started to claim that Donald Trump was a fascist and that he's a student of history and that he knows fascism when he sees it, and that this is another Hitler. And these are all tropes that we've gotten used to over the past few months. Well, it happened to be that three of the people that he was arguing with, and I was present, and I was arguing with him just as strongly as they were Russian immigrants to the United States. And they all said that you cannot ignore, if you are such a student of the crimes of fascism and Nazism, you cannot ignore the crimes of communism. And this has been a topic that's only become en vogue in the past few months because obviously people that are conservatives now are coming to grips with the fact that they're being lumped in with National Socialists, Nazis, and now they're examining exactly what National Socialism entails. National Socialism, if you really want to elucidate what it entails, is a coercive totalitarian ideology that places people of a certain race above others. Okay? Now, which parts of those are wrong? I would say that there's a lot of parts of those that are wrong, and the race part is only one of them. Because in reality, if you are a racist country, did you know that the country of Thailand is very, very discriminatory towards immigration? That you cannot become an immigrant to Thailand unless you commit to a very high capital investment. There have been laws like that in other countries in Europe, for example, in Ireland, in Japan, I believe it's even more restrictive. There are countries that they simply have the opinion that this is the country for the Thai people, and all the other countries are they're entitled to their own way of life. But over here, you are going to be Thai or you're going to be somewhere else. And I think that you know, based on some of the people that I'm going to be speaking with today, I think that there are people, you know, throughout the world and including America that believe in that. And that is not a Nazi ideology. What makes a Nazi ideology is to frame an entire system of government around securing the welfare of a certain race to the exclusion and detriment of others. Okay, what happened with Nazi Germany was that they decided at a certain point that they were going to invade other countries and take over their lands that were not necessarily Germanic. Why is it, if Nazi Germany was such a friend of the Aryan race, so-called Aryan race, why is it that they invaded the Czech Republic? The Czechs are not, you know, they're not a Germanic people, but they're not a African people. They're not an Asian people. They're a Western Slavic people. Why did they invade Greece? Why did they invade all of these countries, Norway, that is in fact just as Nordic as Germany, and coerce the Norwegians into being part of the German Reich to such an extent that even the puppet leaders of Norway, who themselves were classic racists, were given almost no freedom to act in their own manner. This is coercion to the most extreme degree. Nazi Germany was a totalitarian state, and what people focus on is the racial element of it. I'm sorry, but there are a lot of states that have committed genocide in the past. So Nazi Germany in that respect is not unique at all. It's not, the only unique part of that is that they systematized the genocide in many areas. They systematized the murder of gypsies. They systematized the murder of political opponents, of Jewish people, of gay people, of J witnesses. I don't say the word of God, the name of God, so I call them the J witnesses. But yeah, they systematize the murder of entire classes of people based on their race, among other things. And among other things is very important, because then when you start talking about the other classes of people that they murdered, then the racism element it still becomes only part of the problem. So that if you really want to make Nazi Germany an issue of race, then you have to ignore all the other elements that facilitated how they were able to perpetrate what they did. It's a very nuanced issue. Why? Because people have ignored for now almost, I think it's over 70 years, they've ignored the other elements of what Nazi rule entailed. There was mandatory participation in certain organizations. If you were a young German child during those years, you were required to be a member of the Hitler Youth. If you were a girl, I believe they were required to join the League of German Girls. If you were and there were motorist associations, and there was a national union. So I want to ask people, that structure is it not similar to other countries? Other countries around the world, such as North Vietnam, and subsequently the United Country of Vietnam, and China, and the Soviet Union have done that. They've mandatorily made people join certain organizations when they come of age, or if they don't make people join them, then they give those certain organizations a certain privileged class among the population, such as the Communist Party and the Communist Youth Group, Komsomol. This is, in my opinion, where you see a direct tie between the ideology of Nazi Germany and the ideology of totalitarian states. Now, are there non-communist states that have similar ways of life? I think that there are a few. You know, Chile, which was they had a very liberal economy. They did have a very totalitarian state. Not quite as totalitarian, though, as the Soviet Union, but I still oppose it. I still oppose totalitarianism, regardless of what ideology lays behind it. Okay, if I was alive during the Spanish Inquisition, I would have opposed it too. And it's not just because I would have been one of the persecuted faiths. I think that when you put so much power into the hands of a privileged group of people and have them give them the power to persecute people, then that's what you will get. You will get a society that is not free, And the people that are the most creative or the most innovative or the most important will inevitably leave. And that's what happened in most of these societies, I'm sorry to say. Nazi Germany didn't get a chance because they were involved in a war, and they ended up through strategic errors losing every game that they made. So you can make the argument that Nazi Germany, by dint of the strategy that they took, we would have never found out what would have happened had that ideology been allowed to proceed. Let's say if the Western Allies had had truce with Nazi Germany near the end of the war, and they would have been disarmed or something. Well, what would have happened after that? It's anybody's guess. I think there were certain things you can infer that they would continue. They would have continued some of their, persecutory practices towards minorities, and especially religious minorities and ideological minorities. There's no question about that. But how successful would have the country been at keeping its economy together? It's a very good guess. They had to expand and invade other countries in order to properly feed the needs of their economy. Germany is not a country known for having great natural resources. That's why they invaded Norway and other countries that are rich in natural resources. Romania, it has massive oil fields, or they used to. I think they were all tapped out at a certain point. That's why they invaded the Caucasus, because there is oil in the Caucasus. So in order to sustain their system of economy, any coercive state must at some point go far further afield and steal the resources of a different state, and steal them through coercion instead of trade. Now, unfair trade, you could say, is a type of coercion, but it's still trade. But actual invasion is, unequivocally coercion. That's how you've seen that the Soviet Union, during its existence, would undermine the societies of other countries, especially in Africa, especially in the third world, in order to gain control of their resources. You saw that all over Africa, Angola, I believe Somalia at a certain point. I'm not sure exactly why they did it in Somalia, but the Soviet Union was a state that they could not sustain their economy. So therefore, in many cases, they would leech off of their puppet states, such as Germany, East Germany, Hungary, North Korea. They would leech off of them, and this is why the totalitarian model can never really cause harmony between the countries, because it's not enough for each country to have its own system of socialism. They must, in order to compensate for all the failures of their own system, because it's not a consumer system. The consumer is not in mind when planning the economy. The collective is. The individual has no importance. The collective does. So I have to say, this conversation with this man was very frustrating. This is a person, I said to him, he brought up, of course, the murder of the Jews by the Germans. Well, I said, if that's the case, if that's such an awful thing, which it was awful, then you should have no problem condemning the murder of 5 million Ukrainians by Soviet Russia, or the murder of 3 million Cambodians by Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge, or the murder of untold numbers of South Vietnamese by the communist government there, or the murder of tens of millions of people by Mao's China. There should be no issue with you. He said, well, that's not really something that I have a focus on. Well, why is that? Why is it that we don't focus on genocide as a whole instead of on one genocide? I have a feeling that this is because people conveniently like to think, because of the Soviet Union was an ally of the Western powers during World War II, they like to say, well, they did some good in the world. Well, that's not enough for me. That's not enough for me, honestly. If you really look back, in 1939, the Soviet Union had no problem with Germany invading other countries and coercing them into being their slaves. They did that to Poland. They did that to Czechoslovakia. And what did Stalin do? He had his foreign minister, Vyacheslav Molotov, sign a pact with Germany's foreign minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop. And that's how we had the stalemate between Russia and Nazi Germany, they were not fighting each other up until 1941. So who was fighting Nazism, fascism until 1941? Well, that would be the conservative government of Winston Churchill. That was the only country left after 1940. France fell in 1940. So the only country left was a conservative, you could even say a slightly feudal society with the nobility and a constitutional monarchy. Those were the people fighting against fascism. But there's no person in the United States in Antifa or in the Democratic Party or in the Democratic Socialist Association of America or the DSA, I don't know what their initials stand for, or the NAACP. No person in America advocates for constitutional monarchy, and they don't want a society based on the Anglican Church, and they don't believe that Queen Elizabeth should be our sovereign, or King George, whoever it was. They don't advocate for that, yet that was the only country. Remember this, the United Kingdom, for all of its flaws and its coercion of other societies like India, they were the only society that consistently opposed Nazism for the length of World War II. So why are we not championing, instead of socialism, constitutional monarchy? Because obviously we people that are free market capitalists, we recognize that the United States, we were predicated on a different principle than constitutional monarchy. We don't say to other states, you should not have a constitutional monarchy, but we were founded as a republic, a representative republic, and therefore our disagreement with constitutional monarchy is based on a difference of opinion and style. However, there's many things we do share with British society, with British liberal tradition, or the constitutional monarchy. The very fact that we have a constitution derives more from British principles of governance than it does from any other principle that there is. There's some that derives from earlier cases like Rome and Greece, but the fact is that these people that say that they oppose fascism, they don't even know why they oppose fascism. They think that by opposing fascism, they oppose racism. That's not true. There's plenty of countries that are racist, but are not fascist. And by the way, there was a fascist country. Brazil was fascist in the 40s and early 50s. That was not racist. They had no restrictions on race, no restrictions on intermarriage. You can look it up. It's called, I believe it was called the Syndicalists. In Brazil, they had a leader, Getulio Vargas, and he was a fascist. He believed in a regime that was state corporatism, which is really what fascism is. It's a type of socialism. And he was not a racist at all. He never committed a genocide. So it's possible, theoretically, to have a fascist government that is not racist or genocidal. It's possible, but it's not likely. So that is my stance. I oppose all societies that would limit freedom of speech and freedom of expression and freedom of the press, whether they are right-leaning or left-leaning. And that's my opinion. I don't think I need a label for that.